following a really deadly and shocking attack at an LDS church up in Michigan. There's now a new federal task force, and it's built on this, well, pretty explosive claim that the U.S. government was actually weaponized against peaceful Christians.
Yeah, it's really more than just a horrific local event. It almost instantly became a catalyst for a major federal policy shift.
Yeah.
Quite ideological, really.
So that's our mission today, right? We're taking a deep dive into what happened right after that Michigan tragedy.
Exactly. We're going to look at how political leaders framed it, like, immediately. How that framing then led to this new federal policy, one aimed at, well, getting rid of what they see as anti-Christian bias.
And also the practical side. What security changes are happening right now in churches and faith communities? Because the data is showing this huge surge in violence.
It really is. Let's start with the incident itself, because the details are pretty chilling, and they really set everything else in motion.
Yeah, so this was Sunday, September 28th, 2025, Grand Blanc, Michigan. A 40-year-old gunman, Thomas Jacob Sanford, he launched just a devastating attack on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints there.
Right, and it wasn't just shooting. Sanford rammed a truck into the church building first, then opened fire on the congregation, during services.
And then set the building on fire.
Yeah, set it ablaze. The attack led to 4 confirmed deaths. That's not including Sanford himself. He was killed by responding police.
And the sources we looked at really highlight the bravery inside the church. People shielding children, getting them to safety while everything was happening.
Incredible bravery. The building itself, though, a total loss because of the fire.
Yeah, tragic. But the political reaction, the federal response, that was immediate. President Trump, just hours later, called it a targeted attack on Christians in the United States of America.
He didn't stop there. He called for an end to the, quote, epidemic of violence in our country. So the stakes were set right then and there.
So the FBI takes the lead. Naturally, they're treating it as targeted violence, looking for links between the shooter and the church.
Right, so the actual motive was technically still under investigation at that point.
But politically,
yeah,
the narrative was already set. It felt like the policy landscape was already shifting, this idea that people of faith were under siege.
Exactly. And that brings us straight to this wider crisis point that the Michigan attack seemed to just crystallize for a lot of people.
That bravery you mentioned. It was needed because, according to the sources we're looking at, the fear isn't just anecdotal. The data seems to back it up.
Oh, absolutely. This attack fits right into trends showing hostility, even violence, against churches is, well, apparently at an all-time high.
You mentioned data. There's the Family Research Council report.
Right, the FRC, they're a major conservative group tracking this. Their report documented, get this, over 430 incidents just in 2023.
430. And the key thing isn't just the number, it's the speed of the increase, right?
That's the really startling part. That FRC data, it shows an increase of 800% since 2018, just a few years.
800%. I mean, that kind of verifiable, explosive growth.
Yeah.
You can see how it fuels demands for, well, a massive government response.
And you saw this data point, this narrative, really take off immediately in public discussions. Our sources show conservative online forums right after the attack. They instantly linked the violence to, well, opposing ideologies.
What kind of language were they using?
Things like leftist political violence, blaming the left wing, getting crazier and crazier, even calling it radical Democrat terrorism.
Wow. So very strong language. And a sense of mistrust, too.
A deep mistrust, yeah. Commentators were almost predicting, like right away, that the liberal media will spin it as right-wing violence no matter what.
So preemptive defense almost.
Kind of. And you see claims like studies claiming most political violence is right-wing are transparently bogus.
Yeah.
So it's not just about this attack in Michigan. It's feeding into this larger cultural battle where one side feels attacks against them are being ignored or deliberately misreported by mainstream sources.
Okay, so that feeling, that political narrative of being targeted, it's not just a reaction. You're saying it actually drove this big federal policy change.
That's exactly what the sources suggest. It leads directly to this pretty extraordinary policy shift against what's perceived as anti-Christian bias.
And that shift came from the top, a presidential executive order creating the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And it sits within the Department of Justice, the DOJ. It's significant.
It's absolutely huge. And the mandate isn't vague at all. It's explicitly to end the anti-Christian weaponization of government and, protect religious freedom.
The weaponization of government, that's strong phrasing.
It is. And this task force, its job is actually to look backward, to review agencies like the DOJ and the FBI. The FBI director is actually on the task force.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They're tasked with finding and terminating any unlawful anti-Christian policies, practices, or conduct from the previous administration.
So it's not just about future security. It's an explicit challenge to the prior administration's actions, claiming they were biased.
Correct.
What specific examples does the executive order actually point to? What's the proof offered for this alleged weaponization?
Okay, so the order lays out basically three main areas of concern, three categories of alleged targeting. When you put them together, they form this narrative of government hostility.
Right, what's the first?
First is the prosecution of pro-life activists. The sources point to federal charges against nearly 24 pro-life Christians. This included a Catholic priest, even a 75-year-old grandmother, just for praying outside abortion facilities.
So the new administration's view is that the government wrongly targeted religious protest.
Essentially, yes, that's the argument. The second point is kind of the flip side. Failure to act.
Failure to act against violence targeting Christians.
Exactly. The claim is the previous administration largely ignored well over 100 attacks, things like violence, theft, arson against Catholic churches, charities, pro-life centers.
So the accusation is selective enforcement, failing to protect Christian groups.
That's the implication. That the government didn't enforce the law when Christians were the victims, which, allowed hostility to grow.
Okay. And the third grievance, you said that really hit the weaponization idea hard.
Right. That was the FBI memorandum. You might remember this, a 2023 FBI memo. It was later retracted, but it asserted that radical traditionalist Catholics posed a domestic terrorism threat.
And it actually suggested infiltrating churches.
Yes, it suggested infiltrating Catholic churches as a way to mitigate this supposed threat. So let's just pause on that. The task force is basically saying the government was doing three things simultaneously: prosecuting pro-life activists praying, largely ignoring violence against churches, and actively investigating certain Catholic groups as potential terrorists.
Right. That combination is powerful.
That's the core of the argument. That trilogy of actions, according to these sources, is why they claim the government itself fostered an atmosphere of anti-Christian government.
Okay, so the government is being pushed to change its approach, to tackle this perceived institutional bias. But what does this mean practically for you listening? If you go to church on Sunday, how are communities supposed to protect themselves against that 800% rise in hostility we mentioned?
Well, the inescapable conclusion drawn from Michigan and from that surge data is that churches are seen as soft targets. That realization is directly impacting policy, procedure, everything on the ground level. Security is now seen as just essential.
And imperative. And the legal landscape is shifting too, right? There was that federal appeals court ruling about the New York law and trying to ban firearms in places of worship.
That's right. The court rejected that ban. And what that ruling did was affirm the congregation's right to decide for themselves about defense. It essentially protected both First Amendment assembly rights and Second Amendment rights together.
So this is forcing churches into adopting completely new security norms. That must be a huge cultural shift for many.
Oh, it is. We're seeing big changes in how they manage physical spaces and who is providing security.
Like what specifically?
Well, access control is a big one. Many churches now lock their main doors, say, 5 to 15 minutes after the service starts. They'll have ushers watching late arrivals carefully, trying to prevent any surprises.
Makes sense. And personnel. Are they hiring guards?
Some are hiring off-duty police, which is expensive. But more commonly, what we're seeing is reliance on internal security teams.
So members of the congregation.
Yeah, often members who have backgrounds in law enforcement or maybe emergency services. And these team members often carry concealed weapons. Sometimes only the senior church leadership even knows who they are.
Wow. Okay, but it's not just about having armed people present, is it? There's training involved too.
Training is absolutely critical. Churches are putting emergency action plans in place. They're practicing active shooter drills, trying to build that muscle memory for horrible situations.
Right.
And they're incorporating life-saving skills, like the Department of Defense's Stop the Bleedy program, teaching people how to handle severe bleeding.
It's honestly hard to imagine a place of worship needing to teach people how to treat arterial wounds. That shift in mindset alone just tells you how serious the perceived threat is.
It really does. And we should mention federal agencies like CISA, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the FBI, they're offering guidance.
And funding help too.
Yes, encouraging churches to apply for grants, things like the FEMA Nonprofit Security Grant Program or DOJ grants specifically to combat hate crimes, trying to help finance these security upgrades.
Okay, so let's try to summarize this. We had one horrific, very targeted attack in Michigan. It immediately cements this political narrative that anti-Christian bias is systemic. It's dangerous.
Right, and that narrative triggers a major federal response aimed at dismantling what's seen as government hostility.
But at the same time, it forces faith communities themselves to take on the burden of their own security, to become hard targets.
Exactly. The sources really paint a picture of growing division, where violence gets instantly filtered through this highly partisan lens, where that surge in attacks is seen by some as being actively enabled by opposing ideologies.
But maybe the most profound question this all raises, with the new policies, the security teams, the training, it feels personal.
How so?
Well, in a world where targeted violence jumps 800%, where churches teach stop the bleed,
Yeah.
what happens to the line between peaceful worship and the perceived necessity of being armed just to survive? Is there even a line anymore?
That's a heavy question.
It is. And it's one that millions of Americans are likely facing now, maybe subconsciously, every time they walk through those church doors, which might now be locked behind them.